It's interesting because Paul finishes with telling us, basically, he tells us to stand and hold the line. Every movie you've ever seen about ancient warfare is wrong. Every movie you've ever seen of a major battle, how does Hollywood do it? All these soldiers get together, they got their shield, they got their sword, they got their spears, right? And they go into battle, and every movie you've ever seen, it's scattered individual combat, every man for themselves fighting. Am I right? You've never seen it any other way. A whole army gets together, and then the two armies clash, and once the two armies clash, it's everybody standing individually doing their own little fight here and their own little fight over there and their own little fight over there. And once in a while in a movie, a guy will oh, my buddy's getting hit. I'll go over there and rescue him by throwing a spear or shooting an arrow or running up and chopping a guy and helping him with his hands up. And I get him off the ground and say, good, you good? Okay, back to ourselves again. That is not how ancient warfare ever worked. Never in the history of the world is that how warfare worked. The way warfare worked when it was shields and swords is your shield here covered your body and the guy next to you. You had a line of soldiers and a line behind you and a line behind them. And you interlock shields, and your sword would thrust underneath or your spear would thrust overhead. You never broke the line until the battle was won or the battle was lost. The line would break if you were being pushed back. What they would do is they would line up and they would literally push the other line until it stumbled and fell, and then they could just start killing guys on the ground. That's how it worked. You never broke the line. In the ancient Sparta, if you came home and you did not have your shield, you were put to death. If you came home and you had your sword and you had your spear, it didn't matter because the shield protected you and the guy next to you. They'd interlock shields and they would hold the line this way. And then they would put the youngest, strongest newbies on the front line, the experienced soldiers in the middle line, and the old guys at the back line so nobody could turn and run. And they would do this line and they would push and they would shove. And the whole idea was it was a crushing line. You shoved and pushed until you finally broke the other line and they turned and ran. And then you could scatter and do every man for himself. But you've never seen a movie show that. In 1066 at the Battle of Hastings, England's king, Edward the Confessor, died with no child. And when he died, no one knew who should take the throne. And his brother-in-law, Harold the Saxon, said, well, I'm the closest relative standing, I'm going to take it. And meanwhile, Harold's little brother Tostig had run off to the Vikings, we'll just say Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, had hooked up with a king over there, another guy named Harold, and he said, I should be king. And the Vikings well, we'll support you. So they invaded. And Harold the Saxon had to get his army and go way up north to Yorkshire. And up there at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, he killed his brother Tostig, laid waste the Vikings, drove them back. They got in their ships, went back home. Whew, we've won England. I get to be king. And the day he does that, the next day he hears, oh, the Normans, a bunch of ex-descendants of Vikings who had lived in France, had actually crossed the sea and they'd landed in the south of England, and they were going to try to come and claim the throne under William the Conqueror. And so now he's got to freaking march the entire length of England to get all the way to southern England. Now he's way up at the north end, up by Scotland, march the entire distance down to the southern end and get his army ready to fight a battle after marching all that distance and having just won a battle. And he collects some guys along the way. They show up at Hastings in 1066 and they're ready to defeat the Normans. And the battle, scholars don't know how many people there were. They mix and match, they don't know. But at this time, maybe they were equal. Maybe William the Conqueror had more. But Harold the Saxon had the high ground, which meant he had the mountain hill. And so when the Normans conquered, they were up above. So they had the advantage of gravity to push the other guys back. And they held their line. They interlocked shields and they held their line. And the Normans conquered and came and wave after wave. And every time the Saxons held them off and drove them back. And finally, William the Conqueror gets his guys together and says, hey, the only way we're going to get to win this battle is if we can get these guys to break their line. So I want you guys to run up there and then act all scaredy cat and terrified and turn and run away, but run away kind of slow. And so they do. They run up there to the line. They fight a little bit, and they're, and they start backing away, but backing away slow. And then the line, which is supposed to hold, says, "We got them, boys." And they break their line, and they attack this retreating Norman army, and their line no longer holds, and William the Conqueror's army can now invade, and they can break the rest of the line because there's no longer a line to hold. And Harold the Saxon gets hit in the face with an arrow. The battle's over, and William the Conqueror, a descendant of Vikings who is coming from France, takes over England and changes the history of the world for the next several hundred years. Why? Because his soldiers didn't hold the line. They had all day long. They'd held the line all day long. At the end of the day, from 9 a.m. till almost sunset, at near sunset, they finally lost their conviction of what they were doing, and they broke their line and chased the Normans, and it destroyed them. And that was the end of the Saxons owning and running England forever. And now it became Norman country, and everything changed. And it makes me wonder when Jesus is telling us and talking to us about holding the line, it means don't break. You got to understand, if you stand together, you can win. If you break and go isolated and individual, the line will hold, and history itself could change. If you break and go isolated and individual, the line will hold, and history itself could change. He tells Timothy, be watchful. Be sober in your head. Be morally alert. 1 Thessalonians, you are all sons of light and sons of day. And we are not of the night or the darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. Clear mind, clear-headed, able to understand what the truth is. Don't get cloudy in your thinking. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and as the helmet, the hope of salvation. So he says, be watchful. That's how you're going to hold the line. He says, endure afflictions. The enemy is going to come at you trying to break things, trying to destroy stuff. Literally, the word is evil sufferings. You're going to endure evil sufferings, suffer hardship, suffer trouble. But you stand together and you resist. If you stand alone, you'll go down. Endure afflictions. He says, do the work of an evangelist. And here he says, tell the good news. Remember, eternity's on the line. Tell the good news. 1 Corinthians, chapter 1, 17, Paul says, for Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with the wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of no effect. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. I know, you guys that may not believe in Jesus, and you're sitting here like, hey, that whole story about Jesus dying on a cross, putting in a tomb and raising again, you know, it's kind of a crazy story. We're like, I know, we know, right? And you really believe that? Well, yes, we do. You believe it's really true? It really happened? Yes, we do. Wasn't that kind of foolish to believe that? We're like, yes, we know. It is foolish, but it's the truth. And it's the truth that will give you eternal life. It's the truth that will change everything in your life and everything about you and give you an eternal destiny. And the last thing he says, fulfill, complete, bring to full measure, make fully known your service, your ministry. What has God called you to do? How do you end your life knowing whether or not you have fulfilled your ministry? How do you know? Like when you stand before God, when he says, okay, did you complete what I set you out to do? Most of us are going to be like, I actually had no idea what you wanted me to do. I just kind of just went through life. I did my thing. I just sort of woke up every day and did my thing. I wasn't really sure what my service was, what my ministry was, what my calling was. I'm not really sure. And here's Paul telling Timothy, don't quit, complete, fulfill, make sure your ministry is completely fulfilled. And at this point, we're like, well, what if I don't really know what it is I'm supposed to do? Well, then maybe just for this sake, we'll go back to here. Let's go to this one. Backing up a little bit. Right here. Maybe that's your ministry. What am I supposed to do? Convince people, rebuke people, exhort people, do it patiently, and teach people everything you know about Jesus. Well, I don't know a lot. Teach them what you do know. Learn more along the way. Be the person who is an ordinary Joe or Jane Christian who has the conversations and builds the relationships and has the kind of talk where other people's lives get changed, and yours will be changed in the process too.